side stuff, because there's a few more things I gotta do to get the stamps from the stamp board and stuff. But anyway, we did fight the Guardian of Worlds, and then we learned about the Conductor and how he's an unborn version of me. And so now we are going to spend our time reading All the Wizards Can Pick. So we're going to do the stories that are in here. And I'm just going to go in order of these stories. And let's see, I already read that one. The Squirrels and the Bramble. Okay, so I guess we'll start. Hey. The second tale, The Squirrels and the Bramble. Once upon a time, the whole world was lush and green and covered in countless forests. In the mild days of spring, children would play in their clearings, making necklaces from wildflowers, while in summer they would shelter from the sun under their ancient trees. And in autumn, of course, they would pick and eat their juicy fruits. Indeed, forests have always been important to youngsters, being carefree places in which to play with gay abandon. But what do you know of the forest guardians? Every forest has one. They are believed to be godlike creatures that protect the woods they inhabit, as well as all the creatures that dwell within. But how do these guardians come into existence? No human knows for certain, of course, but it is believed that they are somehow selected from amongst the creatures that live in the forest. Naturally, since the guardian is responsible for protecting all the forest inhabitants, the biggest, strongest creature in the forest is usually the one selected. There has, however, been one notable exception as related in this well-known fable. A proclamation from the deities of the forest. A forest, luxuriant with leaves, was home to a gently flowing river and a spring that produced fresh water, and all the beasts lived there in amity, from tiny insects to creatures as big as 2 men. One day, the deities of the forest made a proclamation. The time has come for you to choose your guardian. For the forest did not have a guardian at the time. As soon as the message was received, a controversy prevailed among the beasts of the forest, with each one claiming that he would make the best guardian. These sharp fangs will frighten away any enemy, growled the black wolf. These huge claws will shred impostors to pieces, roared the gray bear. And so it continued, with every large forest animal boasting his own case, from the stag with his great antlers to the white catfish who dwelt in the spring. The forest's smaller inhabitants, those who had no chance of winning any test of strength, could but watch this assembly of the beasts in silence. The bickering continued for several nights, until one day a golden haze descended upon the forest, bringing with it an aroma so sweet that the beasts soon forgot about choosing a guardian and simply spent the day in a contented daze, staring at the new golden coloring of the trees around them. The very next day, however, crimson saplings sprouted from some of the trees and quickly grew into a large tangle of red bramble, for the golden haze the beasts had so enjoyed was, in fact, a cloud of evil-disposed spores. By the time any of them noticed, however, the bramble had covered the entire forest. The bramble. The bramble strangled tree after tree, causing them to wither and die. It seemed only a matter of time before the entire forest would be quite devoid of life. Thus the wise owl said, "Somewhere in this forest is the tree in which the spores first took root. That tree is the source of this terrible bramble. Cut off its source and the entire thicket will wilt." Desperate to save their forest, the black wolf and the gray bear resolved to find the tree that the wise owl had mentioned. However, the bramble had grown so thick and so dense that their great bodies simply would not pass through it. It was time for the smaller forest creatures to come to the fore, the ones who abstained while the other beasts had bickered and boasted about who was strongest. And so the mottled snake slithered through the bramble, moving deep into the forest in search of the tree where first the spores took root. "Alas, the bramble wraps the tree completely," hissed the snake. "We shall need to cut through it somehow, but I have neither claws nor teeth, only this forked tongue." Upon hearing the mottled snake's report, the blue woodpecker leapt into action. "I shall peck through the bramble in no time," he chirped with confidence. But as he neared the tree which the mottled snake had described, the bramble became too thick and he was quite unable to spread his wings, let alone fly close enough to pick up the bramble, and thus he went back dejected. That was when the field mice and the squirrels rendered their assistance. "These sturdy front teeth of ours shall gnaw through the bramble," squeaked the field mice. "But the bramble goes all the way to the top of the tree," observed the squirrels. "Can you truly climb so high?" The field mice had to concede that they could not, and so it was the squirrels who sent off to cut through the bramble that surrounded the tree that had been the first to succumb. The squirrels soon reached the tree and scaled it with ease. In no time at all, they were nibbling at the bramble and making light work of cutting through it. No sooner had they begun to chew their way through the bramble than large parts of the thicket that covered the forest fell away and withered, and so the squirrels decided to continue nibbling until the tree was completely free of the bramble. Alas, the bramble contained poison spores, and the squirrels who swallowed them soon felt the effects and fell lifeless to the forest floor. And yet this did not deter the other brave squirrels who had resolved to rid the tree of the bramble and save the forest at any cost, and each of them continued to chew. The moment the last of the bramble was cut and the entire tangle withered away, as the animals' cries rang out, the squirrels' souls floated from their bodies as pure orbs of light. The black wolf and the gray bear watched in amazement as the orbs floated into a hollow in the tree, bringing it back to life. The deities of the forest had spoken. The squirrels were the forest's true guardians. Though they were among the smallest and weakest of the beasts, their courage was greater than all of the largest creatures. Size has no bearing on a creature's stature. Okay, tale number 3. The fairy who wouldn't stop crying. So this is about Droopy, the teary fairy. Sit tight, boys and girls. I've got a story to tell you. A fairy tale, if you like. Fairies like me used to be 10 a penny, see? But you'd be hard-pressed to find one these days. Always on the move, we are. Anyway, this story is about a very special fairy, and while it all happened a long, long time ago, the fairy's still going strong today, or so I hope anyway. Right then, let's get cracking, ain't it? This story's about a little fairy who wouldn't stop crying. Sobbing he was, day and night. Now, us fairies are hell of a impressionable, especially when we're little. We learn all sorts of tidy tricks from other fairies, but we can pick up bad habits just as easy. I don't know whose miserable mug this poor dab saw when he first popped out into the world, but it must have been proper tragic, because the first thing he ever did in his life was cry, and then he kept on crying. Now, it's not like this fairy wanted to be spouting tears all the time, he just couldn't help himself. Every time it got dark, he'd well up like blinking clockwork, he was. What's more, young fairies can be hell of a cruel, and this little cry fairy got ribbed something terrible. All of which just made him want to cry even more, of course. The Puddle of Tears. One day, a traveling wizard happened to spot this fairy standing next to a puddle of tears. He was proper knackered, this wizard, and hell of thirsty, so what he did was he took a drink from the puddle, ain't it? There's lovely, he thought, and felt 10 times better straight away. Then off he went with a spring in his step and got on with his wizardly work. A bit later, when everything was done, he decided to go back and thank the fairy. For the tears he drank, I mean. But when he came back, the puddle was even bigger than before. "Oh, fairy," he said in his grand old voice, "why do you cry so much? I've been gone 3 days, and still you weep." "Sob," said the fairy, "scared I am, like scared of the dark, and I don't know what to do about it." After a few more sobs, he went on, "And everyone makes fun of me. Good for nothing I am. Life's rubbish." And with that, he went back to sobbing. "I see," said the wise old wizard, stroking his big white beard. "Perhaps a lantern is what you need." So he whips his tidy lantern out of his cloak and plonks it on the end of the fairy's nose, right? Now, the light from the lantern made the fairy blink like mad, but it didn't half cheer him up, and sure enough, he stopped crying. Felt like he had been born again, he did. "You see, little fairy," said the wizard, "you shall never be in the dark again, no matter where you go." I'm not scared anymore," the fairy gasped, cracking the first smile of his whole entire life. "And you are no longer good for nothing either," laughed the wizard. "That smile of yours will bring comfort to a great many people. Come with me, and I shall show you." So the fairy packed up his daps in a little bag and went off with the wizard. They had some pretty hair-raising adventures and all, but the fairy never once got scared. He had the lantern on the end of his nose, see? And even after he parted ways with the kindly wizard, He never cried again, and the light on his nose is still shining to this day. Have a look around, you like. He might be right nearby. Well, what do you say? Proper tidy tale, wasn't it? I bet you got a tear in your eye now. The fourth tale. The Bear Man and the Princess's Tears. See how long it is. Oh god, that's a long one. Okay, a kidnapped princess. The king of a peaceful kingdom had one daughter whom he loved very much. This princess was very brave and very wise, and assisted her father in ruling the kingdom. Hard by the edge of the kingdom was a steep mountain. No one ever approached it, however, for it was known that a witch lived in a cave at its foot. This witch had long had an inclination to rule the kingdom herself, but the fearless princess never failed to foil her plans. The witch had an apprentice who was top half bear and bottom half man. This apprentice was known as the Bear Man, for that was his name, and was fearsomely strong but very dull-witted, and always carried out the witch's commands to the letter. One day the Bear Man was in the cave making potion when the witch returned with a young woman. It was, yes, guess, the princess who was always ruining her plans. The Bear Man looked at the princess and was twice shocked, firstly at how wondrous fair she was, and secondly at the sight of her hands and feet, which the witch had turned to wood using magic. Look after the princess, the witch commanded the Bear Man. Do not let her get hungry or shed a single tear, else there shall be trouble. The Bear Man immediately went to fetch some fruits and preserves from the larder. Since the princess's hands had been turned to wood, the Bear Man had tried to put the fruit in her mouth directly, but the princess turned away from him and looked instead at the witch. What will you do with me? I shall tell your father that I have taken you hostage, the witch replied, and demand his kingdom in return for your freedom. That would be a waste of time, retorted the princess. Father is always telling me not to believe anything witches say. He will not trust you, even if I am in mortal danger. Silence! Shrieked the witch, and with a wave of her wand cursed the princess, who became quite unable to speak. The witch had stolen her voice. The Bear Man's duties. The next day, the witch went to the palace to negotiate with the king, and it was left to the Bear Man to provide for their royal hostage. The Bear Man liked looking after the princess. He felt sorry for her, with her wooden limbs and stolen voice, and he tried his very best to take good care of her. The Bear Man was in fact very kind, you see, and despised doing evil things. He was happy knowing that the witch would not scold him for being kind to the princess. After all, it was the witch herself who had commanded him to look after her. But while the princess did not shed a single tear, neither did she smile so much as once. The Bear Man used the finest ingredients to cook dishes that he hoped would make the princess happy, but when the meals were served, she would do no more than stare at him in total silence. Now, the Bear Man knew that the princess would only smile when her hands and legs were free again, and she had regained her voice. But the Bear Man could not lift the curses himself, and he knew that the witch would never do it. All he could do was continue to cook fine meals for the princess. The princess who wouldn't cry. Several days passed, and still the king would not listen to the witch's demands, just as the princess had foretold. This did nothing for the witch's mood, of course, and one morning when the Bear Man was bringing food to the princess as usual, the witch shouted at him. Why are you wasting such good food on her? Anything will do as long as it stops her from crying. But I thought that the princess would be happier if she could eat fine foods, mistress. Who told you to make her happy? With that, the witch snatched up her wand, and with a flick of her wrist rendered the princess stony deaf. She then proceeded to tell the Bear Man a secret. There is a reason why I told you to stop her from crying. If she sheds but a single tear, all of her curses will be lifted at once. The Bear Man now realized that the witch had not wanted him to be kind to the princess, or to look after her. She had simply wanted him to stop her from crying. He now knew what he had to do to make the princess happy once more. The next time the witch left the cave, the Bear Man put his paws around the princess's rosy neck and started twisting, yet she did not cry. The Bear Man felt he had no choice but to strike her. He was strong, and the poor princess was unbalanced on her wooden legs. She fell to the ground violently. Now cry, I beseech you, cry, and all your curses will be lifted. The deaf princess lay on the ground, clearly in pain, yet still she did not cry. She simply continued to stare directly at the Bear Man. The bear man, for his part, resolved to treat the princess with great cruelty. He stopped feeding her, set snakes and insects upon her, and pulled out her beautiful golden hair. The bear man tried his best to be brutish, but when he looked upon the princess in agony, he felt so sorry for her that he started sobbing. Though he hurriedly wiped the tears away with his big paws, knowing that he must not let the princess see him crying, it was too late. The princess had realized that something was amiss and resolved not to shed a single tear, no matter what ordeals the bear man put her through. The bear man snarled and bared his teeth and treated the princess more cruelly than ever, but the princess was very brave and very wise and did not shed a single tear. Tears at last. A month passed, and the witch visited the king once more. When she returned to the cave this time, however, her mood had changed. The king refuses to negotiate, and there is no point keeping a hostage anymore. It is time to kill her. Upon which she waved her wand once more, sending a deadly arrow whistling towards the princess. The bear man immediately threw his great bulk in front of her, shielding her from the arrow which pierced his chest. As he crashed to the ground, the wand fell from the witch's hand. The bear man's fate was sealed, but with his last morsel of energy, he opened his eyes and looked up at the princess. She stared back at him, her eyes wide. "I have done such terrible things. I will die an evil man in your eyes." Such were the bear man's sorrowful thoughts as he perished. As he did so, tears fell in a flood from the princess's eyes, raining down upon her wooden feet and arms, lifting the curse and returning her to normal. The princess immediately stood, picked up the witch's wand, and used it to draw a rune, for the princess could use magic as well, you see. A large fire engulfed the cave, and the witch's wailing could be heard for miles around. Once the blade had subsided, nothing remained of the witch save for a small pile of pitch-black ashes. At that moment, the bear man was brought back to life as a beautiful young prince, for his dull-witted bear form was nothing but a curse imposed upon him by the wicked witch. The prince asked in a weak voice, for he was still upon the brink of death, "Your Highness, why did you cry for me?" "Witnessing your death, it filled me with a terrible sorrow. Had I only known that crying would lift my curse, I should have done so far sooner. I see now that you were trying to help me, even as you did those horrible things. I treated you terribly, Your Highness. Please forgive me." "Of course I forgive you. You are a kind person at heart, and for that I am truly grateful. Now please, do not die." Upon hearing these words, the prince shed one final tear and breathed his last. The Forbidden Spell. The princess stared at the prince's lifeless body for a long while before picking up the wand once more with conviction. She had settled upon a course of action. She would cast Ashes of Resurrection. Upon casting the spell, the cave was filled with white light, restoring breath to the prince's lungs as it shone upon him. The princess's spell had brought him back to life. The very next moment, however, the princess fell to the ground. As she lay there, she raised her face and asked the prince, "Who are you?" "Ashes of Resurrection is a forbidden spell," he replied mournfully. "Those who cast it always pay a terrible price. The price you have paid is your memory of me." And the prince's eyes filled with tears of terrible sadness once more. "Why are you crying?" asked the puzzled princess. "Because something important has been lost." Upon hearing the princess's next words, however, the prince could not help but smile. "Well, perhaps together we can make it anew?" That was depressing. Let's see, the fifth tale. How long are some of these? Holy crap. Okay. I'll go ahead and do the fifth tale, and then I'll end the video, and then keep going. The fifth tale, The Boy Who Would Be God. I think this is about, what's his name? Horus. The wizard who controlled the clouds. There was once a boy wizard who was endowed with a great deal of magical ability. No sooner was he able to walk than he could cast spells no other wizard could, controlling the clouds above and making great seas and mighty mountains move at will. In truth, such feats did the boy more honor than he deserved, for he had not practiced any more diligently than other wizards. His talents were innate, and had been with him since birth. The boy, however, grew up quite certain that he had been blessed by the gods, and came to believe that his rightful place was among them in heaven itself. No sooner had the thought crossed his mind than the boy became desirous to make an immediate reality. Boys who are born with such exceptional powers are seldom accustomed to waiting. A trial from the gods. The boy made for Jabbar al-Duncan, or Old Smoky is what it is, the highest mountain in all the world, and climbed it to its summit, reasoning that the gods would hear him more clearly if he were closer to heaven. Gods, I beseech you to listen. I am the most powerful wizard in this world. Verily, no man alive is my equal, and thus I believe that my place is in heaven with you. I wish for you to consider me one of your own. The heavens responded with an enormous thunderclap. The boy wizard's insolence had roused the passion of the gods. The thunder was followed by a bolt of lightning aimed directly at the boy. But the boy was ready. With a simple wave of his wand, he swatted the lightning away. Do you see, he cried to the gods with glee, do you see how powerful I am? At length a voice responded from the heavens. Boy, if you truly believe yourself to be as powerful as a god, then you may prove it by taking this trial. Overcome it, and your wish shall be granted. The boy leaped with great joy upon hearing these words, believing as he did that no trial was beyond his powers. Suddenly, however, everything became quite dark. The boy had no idea where he was. Indeed, his hand could not be seen in front of his face. The voice spoke once more. Boy, this is the world of darkness. Your task is to tolerate it for 8 days. So is it simply a matter of waiting? Thought the boy, relieved. That shall not prove difficult. But the voice went on. There is a door in front of you, boy. Raise your hand and you shall feel it. On the other side of this door is the world of light, where all godly knowledge resides. Enter, and you shall become one of us. The door, however, must not be opened until 8 days have passed. With that, the voice fell silent, and all was quiet once more. The boy reached out his hand in front of him. Though he could not see it, the door was there, just as the voice had said. I shall open that door, the boy said decisively. I shall wait a full 8 days, and then I shall become a god, and all will be revealed to me. 7 days of darkness. At first the boy could do nothing but sit and contemplate his current plight. It was not long, however, before his mind started conjuring all sorts of thoughts. What wonders awaited him when he became one of the gods? What manner of place was the heaven that the gods called home? How would he treat his human minions once he was one of their gods? And so it went on. He found himself increasingly agitated, anxious to see what awaited him once he opened the door to the world of light. He kept his resolve for 6 days and 6 nights, but on the 7th day the boy was overcome by curiosity. In 1 more day I shall become a god, thought the boy. Surely it is of no consequence if I open the door a little early. He reached for the door once more and traced its even surface. Eventually his hand came across a small protrusion which felt like the cover of a keyhole. Timidly, the boy lifted it and looked through to the other side. A blaze of blinding light flooded through the keyhole, knocking the boy a full cubit backwards. It was incredibly bright, and yet he simply could not close his eyes. The world on the other side of the door was beyond the boy's human imagination. Its scale and beauty seemed to pierce his very soul. The world of the gods. The thought alone made the boy shiver, but even as he did so, he was plunged into darkness once more. The ever-wondering eye. The boy had failed the trial, yet he was still allowed to enter heaven and become one of the gods, for they acknowledged his abilities and showed compassion toward him. They could not, however, show the same compassion toward his eye, the one that had peered at the world of light. The eye was condemned to wander disembodied through the skies for all eternity. The boy wizard's eye traverses the skies to this day, soaring above the birds, gazing down upon the world below. It can never hope to soar as high as the heaven where the gods reside, however. Indeed, it is trapped between the human world and the world of the gods forever. Occasionally, when it is overwhelmed with extreme dissatisfaction, the eye swoops down close to the earth's surface, bringing a devastating whirlwind in its wake. These howling gales are known to have destroyed cities and forests, and are rightly feared by ordinary humans. And so, the consequences of the boy wizard's folly are still being felt. Oh, that's the Eye of the Storm thing. Okay. Ooh, look at this mural. I can't read that because I'm not going to translate all that in Nazcan. Okay, let's go ahead and end the video and then we'll start on the 6th tale.